Hi, I'm Bilkis Bahari and you're watching Interview of the Day. Each country has its own platform for entrepreneurs to help spur the growth of new businesses. In Kazakhstan, it's called Astana Hub. But how does Astana Hub help startups to develop their ideas and turn it into profitable businesses? Join me in today's interview with CEO of Astana Hub, Joseph Ziegler, to find out. Welcome to the program, Joseph.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Can you please explain what is the main purpose of Astana Hub?
Astana Hub originally started off as a tech park. We were opened by the first president, President Nazarbayev, last November 6th, with the idea that we would help foster entrepreneurship, grow IT companies, young companies. But in the time since we opened, our mandate expanded. And now we're focused across the country. So we will work with startup founders, with entrepreneurs anywhere in the country. They don't have to be here in the capital. Teaching them with workshops about entrepreneurship, mentoring with industry experts, providing connectivity to investors. And we also have some great leverage in the terms of regulation. So I came here from Singapore, and in Singapore we struggled a lot with how do we bring in startups. But to Kazakhstan's great credit, they've done a couple of things that are very unique to Astana Hub. For example, we have our own tax code. So startups that are registered with Astana Hub can take advantage of basically no taxes. So personal income tax, corporate tax, capital gains, VAT, all that's waived for the first 50 years. And as of now, we have over 100 companies that are partaking of that. We also have our own visa system. So if you want to bring in experts from around the world to join your startup, we can actually issue proper working visas up to 5 years.
It's been 1 year since the launch of Astana Hub. So what can you say about the development of startup ecosystem in Kazakhstan?
Well, the startup ecosystem in Kazakhstan, it's in an area we call kind of early activation. In that sense, we do have people doing startups and people that are interested in entrepreneurship, but we have to focus on all the different parts of a startup ecosystem. So, you have entrepreneurs, that's part of it. You need funding, so you have to have people who are open to the idea of funding startups, which might not be the same as traditional funding or traditional investment. You need to get people who are willing to invest their time, so mentors, especially mentors from industries, experts. And you need to have corporates that are willing to engage and work with startups. So usually, like for example, here the banks are quite good at that, working in fintech. So we're having to work across all these different areas to grow that ecosystem. And the way we do that is, in one way, we work with the government to create legislation that supports investment, for example. And then we've got Cause Angels here, which is an angel investment club that works with the startups. And then we have R&D centers here. We have over 17 R&D centers of corporates with companies like Cisco, IBM, but also domestic companies like Cause Telecom that work and provide different workshops or access to equipment for startups. And we have a startup acceleration program. And the acceleration program is where you come in and it's like a boot camp. You intensively focus over the skills that you need to build a company. Ours is 12 weeks. We just finished with our 4th batch of startups. I think we had about 31 came through that batch out of 150 or so applicants. And during their run, they were able to raise 47 million tenge in investment during the program. And they also had about 200 million tenge of revenue, which is about twice the amount of revenue they had before they started the program. So you can see it's starting to get them to the point where they'll be able to organically grow and continue to grow. So we have to work across the whole ecosystem here. There's a lot to do, but it's moving forward, and we have good support. So I'm very enthusiastic to see where we're going.
You've been involved in the startup arena since 1995. I'm sure you have a lot of experience in this area. So based on your observation, what are some of the challenges that are currently being faced by startups in this country?
Kazakhstan It's unique in very, very many ways. And I think when you talk about challenges and uniqueness, there are things that are going to be harder, but there's also advantages that maybe you don't realize are there, right? So Kazakhstan, in many ways, it's so different than like in Southeast Asia and Northeast Asia. 50% of the people are under 30, right? I mean, so many young people. Of course, oil and gas resources, agricultural resources. And so what's nice about that is there are a lot of places that innovation can provide value quickly. When you have a dispersed population, for example, we can have startups that focus in on telemedicine, teleeducation. Agriculture is an area that we can apply a lot of innovation, and you can see benefits quickly. But there's also some challenges here in the sense that we still have to get more investors. It's starting, it's moving along, but investment in a startup business isn't like investing in a mobile phone shop or buying real estate or investing in bank products. And there's a lot of education that we have to do for that. What we're seeing is that usually in an early startup ecosystem, a lot of startups will focus on consumer problems, right? Because these are problems that we all face. You know, gosh, I wish I could get a pizza right now. Oh, you know, I have an idea. You know, I'll do a pizza delivery app. I want a taxi, you know, or I want to go on a date, or something like that. So it's always quite focused towards a consumer's needs. But where, you know, I've mostly worked in since 1995 has been focused on B2B startups, so business-to-business startups. So when you do consumer, you know, you have to deal with consumer wishes, consumers' preferences, marketing, and you're taking a little bit of money from a lot of people, right? When you deal with B2B, you're taking a lot of money from less sources, a longer sales process, but you also have the ability to really grow, because if you can take a multi-million-dollar international company and you can provide savings or get them access to more revenue, you have a lot of potential there. So now we're seeing the startups that are starting to move from B2C to B2B focus. So we've got some that are in security. We have some that are doing biometrics and business services, for example. And that's a kind of showing that the maturity level is starting to grow. And then what we need to be able to do is get more people from industry, because you know, if you're an expert, let's say you know the problems of oil and gas industry, right? Traditionally, you might not want to quit your job and go into a startup. Now, you might in the US because it's quite common, or you might in Europe, but not here, you know, yet. So that's why we have to build up more mentors so we can start to bring in that expertise and kind of push the growth curve for startups. And with that comes more startups that have organically can grow and they're sustainable. And then ultimately where you get is, as these startups start to grow and become sustainable, these guys become mature, they hire more young people, these guys might exit, they might sell the company, and then the cycle starts back, they get back to it. And that's when you have an ecosystem. And until you kind of have these guys grow and be mature enough and make money and sell their company, you don't have a full ecosystem, right? But we're getting closer.
So I think in order to do that, there needs to be like a cultural shift, right?
I've seen it many different places, right? You know, for me, Singapore is a good example, because Singapore is very much a top-down planned economy, right? So even when you're in primary school, they start to say, okay, we need this many accountants, you know, we need this many lawyers. They start to move things around. But Singapore has to live for innovation. It can't, its biggest exports is human capital, right? It's knowledge capital, right? They have to innovate. And so they've made a big shift in the mindset where traditionally you might go to the top university, you would go home and your parents are going to say, okay, you're going to go to a bank or a big corporation and go work. And now they've shifted the mindset that they can take on some risk and they can try their hands at businesses. And you see people quitting, also mature people, and going into startups. So you need that kind of mindset. You need the mindset of taking risks, and that's not always built into the culture because you will fail. I've had maybe 10 startups. Half of them have failed, and the ones that succeeded way overcome the failures, but I've failed many times. And that's part of that culture. If you can't fail, then you can never leap ahead. You can never get any new ideas, right? So that's one thing we have to kind of work on is to make that more and more acceptable with people, to say, okay, you failed, you tried it. Because I think there's a lot more of a culture of being conservative. And then you need a little bit of dissension, right? If you have a very structured place where you can't tell your boss, I don't think that's a good idea, or I think I have a better idea, you can never kind of speak up to that, then that really cuts out the whole point of innovation entrepreneurship. Because at the heart of it, an entrepreneur is someone says, I can do that better, or I have a better solution to this than anybody else, and I'm not going to listen to all these people who say I can't do it. I'm going to go do it. Well, that's kind of it's a little bit of a subversive type idea, and so that's something also we have to build into the culture. People who can say, I can build a better bank, a digital bank, or I can build a better business system, or I can get medical care faster and better out to rural areas than the traditional approach.
How could Astana Hub help entrepreneurs in Kazakhstan to overcome the perception that you just mentioned earlier?
Well, we can lower risk. In many ways, to lower risk, you have to do a couple of things. First of all, with the acceleration program, I'm actually very excited about the failures of the acceleration program, or the failures that you get within any of our programs, because it's much better for someone to come in if they have a bad idea, that they only spend a few months on it and meet other people and say, well, that's not a good idea, and they move on to something else. Because the worst thing is if you really have something that's not going to work out and you spend years and years at it, that could be a complete waste of your time. It could be a business model that's not going to work, right? So in the startup world, you want people to fail fast. We say fail fast, fail forward. And that means if there's going to be problems, hit them now. And you can make decisions, and you can pivot, and you can do different, something else. Like Twitter did not start off being Twitter. It started being something else. Angry Birds had 100 games that didn't work before that. And so that's one way. The other way is that we work with investors, and we're also developing schemes with the government to help provide early stage funding. Now, Astana Hub itself, we don't give money to startups directly. We don't invest. We don't take equity. We're not for profit. However, we do work with sources of revenue who have an appetite for more risk, and we work with the government who can also help it so that investors have the ability to invest in more startups and lower their risk so they can get some money early on.
So I read a very interesting interview that you did back in 2015 with the Singapore Startup Magazine, if I'm not mistaken. So you said that Singapore could be the destination for investors to invest in startups. Do you think Kazakhstan could be the same as well for foreign investors?
We certainly want to make it compelling for investors to come in, and they're investors that have a higher appetite, I think, for risk to be kind of the first people in, because if you can fund the first big ag tech company, agricultural tech company, it can dominate and you can get a good return before you get to like a highly saturated market. In that way, though, we have some really good linkages to Southeast Asia and to Singapore, because I believe those types of investors who are willing to invest in emerging markets, Myanmar and Vietnam, they're used to some of the risks and some of the challenges of going into a completely different market. And we are right now working with several Singapore ones to come over and to establish a fund here. And we're holding an international forum in October, in which we'll be bringing in more partners so they can get more exposure to Kazakhstan.
What is the general perception of the people here on digitalization, entrepreneurship, and startups?
We operate as part of the Digital Kazakhstan program, and so the government has been going through modernization, digitalization of services. And so I think a lot of people have seen that transformation where you went from, I was told something like to get a driver's license was months to being able to do things online. And the post office has gone through this huge transformation where it's very easy to send stuff. You go in there, there's these video conferencing facilities to order, and you can track everything. So I think a lot of the people have been exposed to the benefits of kind of this digitalization. When it comes to entrepreneurship, right now we do get more and more of the younger people that are focused in on that. For example, especially people who have done Bolshek and have had part of their education overseas. What I'm hoping is that it extends more to professional people who have some history in the industry, because we really need them to also enter this entrepreneurship market. And those are the ones we have to work more to kind of reach someone who's been at the state oil company their whole life, or logistics, or the bank. So those are areas that we need to keep kind of pushing on. But the government's, our leadership and our support has been very committed to innovation. We are fundamentally, what we want to achieve is we want to diversify the GDP. And we want to build an economy based on ideas and problem solving, an economy that engages young people, an economy that gives you sovereignty over what you're exporting. But if we can diversify with innovation and entrepreneurship, then we build global businesses that don't require massive capital outlays as traditional businesses would, that are really, they're global from day one. How many people have Netflix? I watch Netflix here. I don't think Netflix went through a lot to expand into Kazakhstan. We want to build more businesses like that. So businesses based upon ideas and problem solvers that can solve problems here in Kazakhstan, that can solve it for Central Asia. And I think there's some really great people that I've worked with that are going to solve worldwide problems, to be honest.
Is it a challenge for you to find investors who believe in emerging businesses here?
We try to bring in some foreign talent to come and do a bit of a knowledge transfer. Traditionally, if you've got money from many parts of the world, you're talking about kind of like cash and land. These are your investments. Sometimes, you have investments in storefronts and businesses like that. But investments for tech firms is a different thing altogether. So our big focus is to create more domestic investors. By bringing in expertise from international investors, by creating these investment groups where we can teach investors, how it's different. Because not only do you have like startups that are new and they're trying to figure out how to do things, but then if you've got investors that are also new and don't know what to expect and how to interact, when you put those together, it could be some chaos, right? Because you have an investor who doesn't know how to interact, and startups can take years. And then the startup doesn't maybe necessarily know how to deal with an inexperienced investor. So we're bringing that level up, right? Through education, through programs. We'll be coming up with some government programs which will help match investment and bring in some more structured investors who have a lot of experience, and they'll share that experience with others. And then they can put in, angel investors can group funds together and get guidance from other investors. And now crowdfunding is starting to come to Kazakhstan. So the idea is too that we can get a lot of people putting in a little bit of money, and as they get more experience, and hopefully the ticket size will grow up, a lot of people with a lot of money, which is great. And there are funds out there, and there are oligarchs that have the ability to invest. There's entrepreneurs. There are people who have cash sitting in the bank, who are willing to put some aside into tech markets. So that's good. Now we just have to educate them so that they're comfortable to do it and that their expectations are all set.
Okay, I'm down to my last question. Okay. How many startups have you helped, and how many investments have you attracted since a year ago?
So how many startups have we helped? So we've got different kinds of programs to help startups. We've got just workshops and kind of things that the public can come into, and then we've got structured programs. We have co-working space. So in the incubator, we've had about 180 startups that have gone through residency here. And in that program, they interact with other entrepreneurs. It's not a structured program where we're giving classes. That's the accelerator, which we're at about about 78 startups. And even in the last batch, those companies, the 31 that went through the last batch, they created about 149 new jobs here. And so, those people are now experiencing entrepreneurship. So the last time we checked, we estimated we probably have touched about 1,000 possible entrepreneurs have come through the program. And right now, Astana Hub is the most highly subscribed tech hub in the country. We've got the followers on media. So since we've opened, we've had about $1 billion investment into startups, billion tenge investments into startups at different ticket sizes. So we do have a few startups here, for example, who have gotten investment in the hundreds of thousands of US dollars, which for us, for Kazakhstan, that's quite advanced. That's a pretty large investment. We even have one who's gotten well beyond that, which is extremely exciting for us. We've also, in addition to having all the structured classes, we do weekend programs, and we've had about 150 people go through our weekend startup school program, for example.
That's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for joining us in the program, Joseph.
Thanks for having me.
That was CEO of Astana Hub, Joseph Ziegler. You're watching Interview of the Day with me, Bilkis Bahari. Thanks for watching, and see you again soon only on Kazakh TV.